Okay, well, good morning, everybody. We appreciate you coming early on a weekday morning here, and that you show interest among all the very interesting panels that are happening right now. My name is Jim Potofsky. I'm the Managing Director of Strategic Alliances at the John Templeton Foundation, and we're excited for the conversation this morning. We have a great panel, and we're very interested to engage you because we recognize that some of you in this room are philanthropists, some earlier in the world of philanthropy, and some very advanced and could be on this panel as well. And there are others who may be advising philanthropists, and so we hope this is informative for you and challenges the way that you approach philanthropy. The way that we're trying to tackle this is, for many years, checkbook philanthropy has been happening, and the ones that all the folks up here are approaching things in different ways that go well beyond checkbook philanthropy. It's a very diverse panel in the sense that they come from different parts of the globe and are addressing a variety of different issues, and among the five of them, approaching things in very different ways. But the unifying factor is that they're approaching things differently than what's traditionally been done. Some are employing technology in the way that they actually use as a mechanism to find innovative practices, and some are using technology with the NGOs that they're working with around the world. Some are personally engaged very deeply in actually running some of the philanthropies that they're doing, and some of the NGOs that they're supporting. And some are engaging and employing prizes and challenges. So you'll hear from them about the different ways that they're approaching it. So we're excited for today. Their bios are in there, so I'm not going to walk through their bios and just read to you. So you have them in your program, just so you know who is who. We'll just go down the line, actually, and just say the names. Let's just do that. And then after that, I'll be peppering questions to them.
Very good morning. Andrew Forrest.
Good morning. Jean Case, CEO of the Case Foundation.
Good morning. Titi Masiwa, Higher Life Foundation.
Good morning. Dick Merkin, Heritage Group.
George Weiss, Sayest Education.
So the first question is, you know, a number of philanthropists in this world and maybe in this room can go it alone sometimes. And that can be easy because you're the one who controls how things are done, but it also can be challenging because it limits the potential impact that you can do. So we're curious, can anybody share on the panel what you're doing to leverage resources? And that can be both in dollars or human capital in efforts to build alliances. So anybody want to speak to alliances that you built saying, okay, I could go it alone, but I can go a lot further if I join forces with somebody?
I can do that. Let me start with, I was trained as a physician, and we have a $3 trillion healthcare problem. And we spend most of those $3 trillion on service and very, very little on cure. Mostly on care, very little on cure. NIH has a budget of about $30 billion, which is 1% of what we spend on care. So we reflected on that and said there is so much waste in the care portion. Yesterday it was pointed out that, at least according to one RAND study, there was $800 billion worth of waste. So we felt that if we could take some of those care dollars and transform them into cure dollars, we would be leveraging our philanthropy. So what did we do? We felt that Wall Street had the best data scientists and the best individuals that could create algorithms. So we created a prize where it was a $3 million prize, where we challenged and incentivized competition globally to create a predictive modeling algorithm to predict in any given patient population who would be hospitalized and how many days they would be hospitalized within the next year. We had discussed this with the Aetnas and the Blues, and they all thought that they were at the top of their game. We felt that this was a data problem and an information science problem, and we challenged the globe. And we had 39,000 entries in 41 countries. And eventually we had 6,000 teams, and they improved the predictability over sixfold. We now have improved the amount of readmissions in our group, and CMS, the government Medicare and Medicaid organization, has asked if we would donate that to the government to see if we can save money from unnecessary care. This led to crowdsourcing not only for solutions, but actually for other questions that individuals in local governments might not be able to afford themselves. And with the, I think there's some slides on this, on the joint bipartisan committee, we actually have another prize where we are asking the citizens of the United States to bring in questions that they want on healthcare. And this has gone on. Now we have 3 or 4 other prizes, which we can discuss later.
Andrew, did you want to speak? You've been coalescing some interesting forces together to combat modern-day slavery, so you want to speak to that?
Yeah, look, thank you. Well, first, we kind of went it alone to just get a technical credibility up. We worked with Palantir, so we did big data mining. We worked with a geospatial organization called Digital Globe. We began to map the world in terms of where you could identify slavery, like charcoal slave camps all throughout Brazil, brick kilns all throughout the world. These are hotspots for slavery. So we could actually map this, and then once we had a technical base, we were able to reach out to other NGOs and organisations like ourselves all over the world and form partnerships with them. And we both fund them and let them share our technology base. And the technology base extends to the aspects I spoke about, but it also extends to how to get major movements going in your country. So we have around 6.5, 7 million supporters now. We're aiming for 50 million supporters, and we share that know-how with other like-minded organisations in a kind of partnership arrangement. But I suppose the really big one where we went for massive leverage is where you all know that you don't have to be Einstein to figure this out, but one of the real issues in human history is the religions thinking it's their way or the highway and not getting along with each other. And you've seen, 1700 years ago, the Sunni and Shia Islamic split basically came almost 2 separate religions. You saw the Anglican religion split off from the Catholic religion. And there's some pretty serious challenges here, but we know that the religions can speak to billions of people at once. And so we went to see the Al-Azhar al-Sharif, who's the global authority on the Quran. And we went to see the Pope and his cardinals and bishops. We went to see the Archbishop of Canterbury. And because the argument was so persuasive that, we need to put down our differences, guys. We need to say, we can't let our children inherit a world with slavery in it. Abraham Lincoln kicked this off, and we thought slavery died with him. It didn't. Wilberforce put a big dent in it. But it's got bigger than it's ever been in human history. You can add all the slaves up today, it's probably more than there's ever been. And that's our world, that's what we live in. So in saying this to someone like the Grand Imam, who the Islamic world all look to for interpretation of the Quran and for fatwas, and to say, what should we do about this? To say the same message to the Pope or to his bishops, or the Archbishop of Canterbury, they kind of got it, and they thought, actually, this is much bigger than our differences. When Pope Benedict made a speech at the Rheingold Centre and basically didn't exactly compliment his Islamic brothers and sisters, it split diplomatic relations. Now, how long were we going to bear a grudge for? These guys actually decided, let's forget those differences, and they formed for the first time, I think, between Anglican and Catholics, the first executive agreement between them since prior to the Reformation. But then getting the Christianity together with Islam that was a whole heap more challenging. And we're able to put that together in an executive company which has got a board of counsellors, which includes Islam and Christians. It's got an executive board, it's got a chief executive, it's got a whole range of totally unrealistic targets which we're going to achieve. And everyone's funding it. We're funding it, the Catholics are funding it, the Sunnis are funding it, the Anglicans are funding it. So it's a really serious cooperation. And through them we tend to reach out to billions and billions of people to say, hey, in your congregation, do you really want to have a community with any slavery in it? One slave depreciates all of us. So that's just the leverage we used.
Now, I'll start with Tsitsi on this one. So a number of you all of you are providing financial support to the various philanthropies that you support, but and some of you are engaged very personally. So can you talk a little bit about how you go deeper beyond just the check for those that are sitting here thinking, well, I'm doing so much, I'm giving so much, and if you can challenge them even more to say, well, there's even further where you can go.
Okay. I'm from Zimbabwe, the most unlikely place for one to be talking about philanthropy. But how we started was with the idea of wanting to make a difference in the community before there was any money. So we knew we were going to set up a very good business in mobile telephones, a great industry with great potential for growth. So on that basis, we got involved. Initially, it was about writing checks. We started 1998. That's when I really started on a full-time basis working for the foundation. So we identified orphans. We focused on orphan children, mainly from HIV, in the communities. Went to the schools, the headmasters, community workers. It was easy to identify them. They were the poorest looking, the most, the ones with no uniforms, the ones who were probably on 1 meal a day. So identification was very easy. And we focused on growing the numbers. The numbers grew from 600 to 40,000. And then, we're invested in technology in quite a number of countries. So as the business grew, it became very evident that we needed to use the link between the resources and the expertise within the business and the work in education to make the reach even broader and to make the delivery of not just scholarship, but the quality of the education, get a bigger reach and be done more effectively. Now, in a place like Zimbabwe, it's very difficult to go and to look for people who have the ideas, have the skills, and have had the exposure to understand what needs to be done, and then to have the confidence to invest money in them and sit back and, maybe from a distant observe how the work goes. It's literally impossible. The skills are not there. The people have the hearts, they have the desire, they want to be involved. But there's such a gap in terms of, when we talk about what technology is doing in terms of transforming education in the developed world, in the US, it's like we look like we are really in the dark ages. But thank goodness for the fact that we also have the millenniums who've traveled, who've been educated in overseas good universities. And those now begin to form the skills, the basis which we use as key staff members to help us to really translate our dollars into impact, into change in quality of lives, and into really making a difference in a much larger group of people. We started with, like I said, 600 to 40,000. Now we're looking at a project where we can, using cell phones, we can reach 1.5 to 2 million. Our network alone has more than 8 million customers, so the potential to reach everybody is there. It's just, how to do it. Like I said, the skills are within the company in terms of the research, the innovation, and project management. And the heart, the people on the ground, the community workers are within the foundation. So I found myself very much involved. But I hope to get to a place where I can step back and then identify, community champions who are skilled, who are, passionate, who have the exposure to be able to take on these projects personally, and we step back and remain as investors, but we are not there yet.
Yeah, so if you picked up on it, in addition to the financial support that Tsitsi provides, she runs the NGO that they are supporting and lives and breathes it. Yeah. Jean, do you want to speak to this at all?
Sure, and I was thinking as Tsitsi was talking, there's a great African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go too far, you must go together. And I think that really speaks to the need for collaboration in this world, because we do want to go far. We do want to make great strides in areas where we really haven't seen a lot of breakthroughs. And some of these are both in the United States and many are globally as well. At the Case Foundation, collaboration has been really key, and particularly cross-sector collaboration. So if you're sitting in the audience, no matter where you are on the philanthropy sort of realm, if you're getting started, if you're, you've been doing it for a while, or you're maybe more expert than I am, which would not be hard, you might be thinking, well, how could I possibly get engaged with, say, a public sector? But one of the things we're seeing in the United States, and we're seeing this around the world too, are terrific opportunities that are based on where you live. So there's a lot of heat today around looking at cities and where you reside. And this is true if you're an individual thinking about how you can play a role with your talents and your money. And this is true if you're, a formal foundation. There are tons of on-ramps now that enable you to come in and partner with the public sector in exciting ways to address the challenges of your own community or other communities that you might be interested in. This cross-sector thing we think is really, really powerful. There's a second thing that I think is kind of in this conversation, and that is really the democratization of philanthropy. Because there are a lot of folks, we have said all along, philanthropy should not just be rich people writing checks, right? We're a healthier world when we're all locked arms bringing to it what we can. We think rich people should write checks, and we're fully supportive of that, but we're leaving a lot on the table if we don't engage others. So one of the things we've been very excited by, thank you, is platform level stuff. And there, we have funded 3 giving platforms that enable people with micro donations to come in and play a role. And the really exciting news there is it's gotten to a level of scale that's very exciting. So just one of the platforms alone, known as Network for Good, announced last month that they had surpassed over $1 billion in micro donation gifts. So for us, we had taken about $4 million and invested in these 3 platforms. And today those 3 platforms are really coming close to a total of $2 billion of other giving unleashed. In the prizes and challenges front, we've really seen some exciting stuff there. We co-hosted with the White House a summit on innovation. And actually, we asked the X Prize to come in and help us with a workshop. The president wrote a presidential order compelling agencies to try prizes and grand challenges to find innovation and really to tap the wisdom of the crowds. The recognition being that maybe the smartest people in the world aren't necessarily working at federal agencies. We have a lot of talent, but there's a lot of talent that's not working in our federal agencies. So we did a workshop with these agencies and did some trainings on trying prizes and challenges, and we've just been really quite taken with what's come of that. So 2 years later, we went back and we said, all right, what were some of the outcomes? Today at NASA, there's housed an online site called challenge.gov. And again, no matter where you are in this realm, there's an opportunity for you to play a role either in supporting some of the challenges or championing some of the stuff that they're doing. But it's really exciting. Like if you look today, there's a challenge going on to try to build a solar robot. And there we're tapping the wisdom around the nation for ideas. And as was brought up earlier, it isn't really about who's going to win the prize. It's all the technology and all the thinking that goes into the idea of a prize that then gets used in powerful ways. So this collaboration between both the ability to use technology to democratize support for things and to tap the wisdom of the crowds, it's kind of a new day. And I think it's very, very exciting leveraged philanthropy.
Thanks, Jean. I'll come back to technology in a moment, but I wanted to turn to George, although this question is open to all of you, but I'll start with George. Can you speak a little bit to what lessons you might have, like, as you sort of figure out either what entrepreneurial organizations you support, or how to be innovative in the way that you deliver your philanthropy. Any lessons that you want to share? Anything that you say, okay, I wish I had known this when I first set out, but now I'll share it with those who are following a similar path as I.
Okay, be delighted. Firstly, just by a short way of background, I started Say Yes to Education in 1987 with 112 inner city kids. And that has now morphed into 65,000 kids. And we have a citywide approach. We've taken over the cities of Syracuse and Buffalo, New York. And we're about to expand and take on 2 other larger cities, more diversified out of New York. And we probably will have about 250,000 kids. And the lessons learned, okay, when we started out, you take over these 112 kids in the worst part of West Philadelphia. I had upper middle class expectations. I expected all the kids to get A's, straight A's, and all go to Penn, which is my alma mater. And I soon realized that expectation was probably not reasonable. But with the lessons you learn is to have the kids be the best that they can be. And I took a group of our young ladies, out to dinner about 10 years ago. So they're probably now, at that point, they're about 30 years of age. And one of the young ladies said to me, "Mr. Weiss, can I critique Say Yes?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, I was always known as a leader. I was president of, my class. And because of the pressure that I felt from you and the people that work for Say Yes, I went to college. I flunked out. I went to another college. I flunked out. And I always wanted to be a hairdresser. I wanted to be the best hairdresser I could be. Finally, you send me to a cosmetology program, and guess what? I'm the best hairdresser I can be. So we learned the lesson, be the best that you want to be. And it's a great lesson not only for my Say Yes kids, but also for my family. The lessons you learn that we started, with the kids at the end of the 6th grade, which was really the Jean Lang model. And when I found that my kids in the 7th grade were sexually active, they were dealing drugs, and so what we did is we started earlier and earlier and earlier. And by starting earlier, you can inculcate them with different values. The success ratio, or our first program, 50% of our young women were pregnant by the age of 18, and those numbers dropped to like 3%. The felon rate, which was very high, which I can't remember offhand in the initial program, we ended up having 1 felon in every other program. And then the same thing is because we started them young, and you can start, talking to them. When you have them at 7th grade, they know all the answers, and they have all the teenage problems. So the lessons learned. The other thing that we did is we set an off-site retreat, and I was the pretty girl at this. I was not allowed to say anything for 3 days, and what they really did is restructured the model. We had different programs in 4 or 5 different cities. And the kids were there, the Say Yes young adults, parents, educators. And what we did is we adopted a citywide model. So as businessmen, you always look to say, hey, what have you done wrong? Okay, even though you're doing great good, what can you do better? So we did adopt this, citywide model. And just briefly, I'll explain the model because, it answers your question a little bit about leverage as well, is that we come into the city. And the first thing we do is we say to the parents that if you have a kid in the public school system, you'll get free legal aid. Now, it's a little backwards use of leverage because it allows the family to spend money on some other important things, but it makes the home life better, which makes the kid's chance for succeed. Then what we did is we changed the contracts. Okay, the teachers union, the Teamsters union, everybody changed their contract. We paid for an extended school day and an extended school year to give these kids a better opportunity. We put a social worker in every school, and we adopted a student monitoring system, which is so critical that that we know almost immediately when a kid's having a problem, whether it's a health issue, whether it's an academic issue, so you can get right on it. The problem in the inner city, they don't know these kids having problems for an extended period of time. We put in a mental health clinic in every school. And I know this is a long-winded answer to your question, so forgive me for that, but I do have a 7th degree black belt in Taekwondo, so I can get away with some of this stuff.
You tell me this now?
So we have a mental health clinic, and there's a piece of data that's out there that's really important for this audience to hear. 24.8% of the kids from the worst part of the inner cities have mental health issues. And if you don't address that, these kids have no chance of succeeding. We have health clinics that we put up around the city. We do the after-school programs and all, that. But equally important is when the kids end their sophomore year, as a lot of the people in the audience will know, is the high school guidance counselors are terrible in the inner city. So we really take on that role. We actually, with some corporate help, we send our kids around to visit different schools. We have them and guide them to apply to schools, that suit their needs, not because they have a great basketball program or some other reason. But we work with them on SAT prep. We help them fill out their financial aid form. But that really what the key is hope. 64 private colleges, including all the Ivy League schools, Promoter, Duke, Notre Dame, Georgetown, offer our kids basically free tuition. And to be part of the Say Yes Compact, each one of these 64 colleges have to, in writing, guarantee that they will provide mentoring and support systems for our kids. And the data out of Syracuse is the last 3 years, 90% of our kids in private colleges stayed at that colleges, where the national average is 68%, and that includes kids from Beverly Hills High School. So the whole key is about hope. It is about hands-on. The one flaw is in my first, 20-odd years of this program, the kids had to look me in the eye and said they failed. When you go to the citywide approach, Syracuse has 21,000 kids in it. Buffalo has 39,000. The kids can't look me in the eye and say they're going to drop out, and that is one of the flaws. But when you look at it, what is the greater good? When you can revitalize the city and get them excited. And the chief of police in Syracuse told me the juvenile crime rate is down 50% because of that hope.
Well, thank you, George. Anybody else want to speak to this? One of the things that we talked about before we came in was that we want to focus more on the what and the how rather than on the why. So does anybody want to speak to sort of the tactics about lessons that you want to share with the folks here about things that you've learned along the way and you now have been doing differently? Jean.
Sure. Well, there's a really simple, it's almost so simple you'll go, duh, when I say it. But we really have realized there's a very powerful role in what we call recognize, reward, and inspire. And in what I just said, you didn't hear anything about money. And I would just say to anybody looking at philanthropy or looking at wanting to make a change somewhere in your community or somewhere around the world, there's a powerful role there. And it took us a little while to realize that, because when we got started, we really wanted to fly under the radar screen. We didn't think it should be about us at all. It should be about the organizations we're trying to lift up and support. But it was ultimately the grantees and different things that we supported who came to us and said, maybe the most important thing you guys can give us is your reputation. And I think we learned that lesson very powerfully as we began to get comfortable with the idea that we would attach our names to things that we were backing. In addition, even the awards programs, and this can range anything from small to really large, and I'm not talking about sort of prizes to find innovation. I'm just talking about literally rewarding great things. And this can happen at small levels, and this can happen at really high levels. It can involve money. It doesn't have to involve money. But the whole idea of almost using any access you have to a bully pulpit, to a spotlight, and if you're in this room, you are a person of great accomplishment in this world. That's why you're at the Milken Conference. And so anyone can look at ways that they can champion causes they believe in. We have social media and technology today. We've been doing experiments at the Case Foundation since social media first arrived on the scene terrific platform opportunity for you to recognize and reward great things you know about. And you know the #1 reason people get engaged or give is because somebody asked them. And then the #1 reason that people get engaged in, or #2 reason people get engaged and give, is because a friend told them about something. Just put a little spotlight on it. So I think, you know, we can talk about, and we have sort of this complex model we use for business planning at the Case Foundation, but I think it's really important to step back and say you really don't even have to have an entity or a structure. You can be one person, and if you're thinking about great things you come across that you think others should know about, use whatever you have available to recognize, reward that, and inspire other people through it.
Yeah, look, I completely applaud Jean's suite of points there to really encourage the individual. I think that's fantastic, Jean. For any of you in this audience who are thinking about going into philanthropy on almost a full-time basis, or you're really contemplating a cause you're passionate about, that I'd really like to encourage and say to you, if you've been successful in business, there's so many people who kick off in business and then kind of, when they've done okay at it, they think, well, I'd like to really give to my society or to a community. I'd like to build up an organisation or a cause. But for some reason, they leave that business brain behind. You know, they kind of lead with this feel-good as opposed to do-good attitude. And I'd say, stop there for a moment. Let's just all remember we all burn in the fire of time. What is the most generous thing you can give? It's your time. Set up. Well, let's just get in it with a bit of enthusiasm.
Yeah, exactly. I like that.
So, bearing that enormous gift, you know, because money's quite replaceable, your time is not. You know, your time is so completely precious. And if you can take that skill base which built up your business and apply the hard-edged principles, unrealistic targets, absolute measurement, encouragement, empowerment, frugality, expectation, then you're going to make that particular philanthropic dollar go so much further. And what's more, you'll pick up what Jean's saying. You'll be able to take a whole heap of people with you who you will be encouraging, who you will be empowering, who you'll be leveraging your personality like you do in business into philanthropy. And that's, I think, incredibly important to make any cause successful. So start with your own passion. Continue with business principles. Set totally unrealistic goals. And then go like crazy to make them realistic.
Yeah, well said.
Okay.
Excellent.
I want to come back to technology because some of you have mentioned it. Dick, you know, you use technology as an engagement tool around the prize, if you can speak to that. And Tsitsi, you use it as a way around the actual delivery of the services. So at least if the two of you can speak to that and others that want to chime in about technology, that'd be great too.
Well, actually, when you think of technology and when you think of incentivized competitions, what inspired me was just the history of incentivized competitions. Napoleon started the canning industry. The English government started shipping. There was no way of measuring longitude, and they kept on crashing. And the English government said, well, let's see if we can have a prize to effectuate longitudinal measurement. And a watchmaker did that. And after that, we had a lot more expeditions. And Napoleon's troops were not dying in war, they were dying from disease and malnutrition. So he had a $5,000 prize to develop, which eventually developed into the canning industry. And a candy maker put some food in a bottle and boiled it, and that led to the canning industry. And what I found interesting as far as leveraging is some large industries, like the airline industry, was started because of Lindbergh. Lindbergh went to France because of a $25,000 prize. And he had only flown for 2 years, and there were a lot of people with a lot more experience. In fact, nobody would give him a plane because they said, look, some of the best pilots in the world have died trying to do this. And you're a newbie. And yet, just through sheer will, and what we've learned is people from all walks of life, people that you would never, never expect to enter, are accomplishing things, as Jean said, just through sheer will and through sheer engagement and passion about it. So we saw that it was technology. So what we did is we said, well, let's open this up. And for our $3 million prize, which was larger than the Gates Foundation, larger than the Nobel Prize, and people said, wow, this is a great prize for healthcare. But there were $39 million, more than a 10-to-1 ratio of people that entered the prize. They spent $39 million to win $3 million. And that has saved billions of dollars. So what we try to do as far as leveraging is hopefully in some of these cases actually develop an industry. So that's how we've been using it, and I'd like to hear how you're using it.
You know, when I think of technology, it's the impact, and it's at two levels. When you look at the problems in Africa, they may look really insurmountable, but I know there's a really strong positive story coming out of the consistent economic growth rates, democracy, and there's a big diaspora out there in developed countries that is really actively invested in African countries. But one area, when you mentioned collaboration for me, is how not send money, not give money, but it's how you can share your knowledge. You know, knowledge empowers. What youngsters want is information. They want to learn about what are the opportunities out there, and the internet gives us the vast opportunities to do that. And when I'm listening to the great resources here, I'm thinking to myself, if they could just give me an hour a month, I will mobilize the youngsters, whether they're in Burundi or in Lesotho, in Zimbabwe, in South Africa, because that's where I'm actively working. The way you will change the mindsets of the people and open their eyes and the opportunities available for them is amazing. So that's one thing I would love to take away with me today. It's not money, it is just opportunity, 1 hour to speak, to talk, to inspire, to motivate. The second issue is on how we're using technology. As I said before, we have a cell phone company. So the cell phone is where everything happens, especially in Africa. That's where your transactions, savings, we use people, we have a product that allows people to save $1 a day. People want to save money. We have a product where people can send money to the villages, the remotest of villages all over the country because of the cell phone. So the amount of time an individual spends on their cell phone is, I think, much higher than in developed countries for the simple reason that there's a lot more that you need to do that can be done in terms of education. We are putting education not just on the tablet, but also on a cell phone, so that even if you don't have electricity, you don't have water, you have information that can empower you to tell you where to get the water, how to get the water, also how to solve the problems in the long term. That technology is available. For me, I look at how did I get that information? How did we get the opportunities? It wasn't just me, by the way. It's I work together with my husband. I stick to the work that is non-profit, and he sticks to the for-profit. So that's how we make sure that we don't irritate each other. But in terms of the opportunities we have with technology, it's the opportunity we have to accelerate development, to accelerate innovation. Everybody has a capacity to be creative if they're given the space to. So in a nutshell, that's how I see the role of technology. We are using tablets as well to get textbooks to students in universities, in colleges, at a very affordable cost by negotiating with publishers. So like your medical students, your engineering students, vet students, nursing students are able to read for the 3 years, 5 years they're in university, and then thereafter you hand over the tablet to somebody else, and you don't have to look for the money or to have to learn via to, to become a qualified doctor or engineer. Yeah, I'll stop.
Yeah, Jim, I want to underscore what Andrew and Cece said around really taking sort of what you're fundamentally good at and where your passions are and applying it rather than just leading from the heart. And a couple of examples here. Several years ago, we took our kids with us on Thanksgiving to a homeless shelter to volunteer. And my husband was with me, and we had both, of course, spent our careers in technology and built this great company, AOL, and we're really interested in sort of, strategic change, how we could look at change in communities. And, they basically had him cut carrots in the kitchen. Now, it was very sweet, and it was a humbling, sort of very servant-oriented kind of thing that he was happy to do. But I really felt like that was a missed opportunity, because if he was going to spend an hour or two or half a day somewhere, he would be so much better off meeting with the teams, talking about what's your business model, how have you leveraged technology, what could we do here, and bringing that unique asset that is sort of the business perspective to the party. And I just think it took us a little while to figure out in philanthropy, and it's exactly what you said, Andrew, in philanthropy, where we were going to be most effective really were the same places that got us to success in business. But somehow when we started in philanthropy, we thought we had to be different. We thought we had to be different people. And to your cell phone example in Africa, we've done clean water initiatives in Africa and 10 sub-Saharan African countries. And thinking about how technology has empowered citizens, I want to say maybe 5 years ago, to understand the impacts and where we were with the initiatives we had funded and the interventions, we had to hire consulting firms to send people out and ask questions in villages. Today, we fund a platform that enables the villagers to say, yes, I have an intervention, yes, it's working, or no, it's not, come fix it. And so the world has really changed with technology being so empowering, but we do need these strong partnerships with business, I think, to fully leverage that.
And George, and then I'm going to ask one more question, and we're going to open it up for Q&A. So be thinking about your questions. But I'll have one question before. I
do want to address what Andrew started, but I do want to add one thing to your question about lessons learned. And yesterday I was on an educational panel, and the one mistake that a lot of people have made, including myself, and say yes, is that we look at college matriculation rates. Okay, because that's the scorecard, but really the key number is how many of these kids graduate college. So that was a lesson, which was an important lesson. And so getting back to Andrew's question, I'm going to talk about something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about cancer. And I have no cancer in my history. And everybody knows how dynamic Michael is. And I had read some work about a guy named Dr. Carl June, like in the month of June. And I sat down and had brunch with Michael, 2.5 hours sitting there getting machine gun with all these facts. He said to me that Dr. June's work is one of the foremost important medical discoveries of all time. Okay, and that piqued my interest. And I have a cousin who's the chief scientific officer at Dana-Farber, which is Harvard's cancer hospital. He said, this is the most important breakthrough in cancer research. So I started looking at, and I started using some of my business skills, which really what, Andrew, you're challenging the audience to do, is I started looking at it, and I started doing a deep dive into leukemia. And the chief scientific officer of leukemia at the conference last year told me that you can use the word cured when you talk about leukemia. So I started doing a deep dive, and the skill sets that I bring, okay, is I'm a pretty accomplished fundraiser. And I did raise $4.3 billion as I led Penn's fundraising drive, which ended thankfully last year. And but taking enthusiasm, understanding the science, which is, I'm a finance guy, and it's not the easiest thing, but doing a deep dive into the different cancers, like pancreatic cancer, and where different scientists have told me, using the same research, okay, of Dr. June, Okay, at Penn, they have a cure for pancreatic cancer. The difficulty is the delivery, because the pancreas creates, almost like a cement-like shell. Michael, at his Prostate Cancer Foundation fundraiser in New York, said that Dr. June is the best hope for prostate cancer. So what you have, and I see you nodding your head, and I know you're okay. And you're in a science, you're obviously a scientist, and but what's really interesting is you see an opportunity for hope and an opportunity solutions. Okay, instead of shooting high, as you look at what's happening, okay, and trying to put your business skills and the skills that you bring to the table for the greater good. And it doesn't matter where the science is being created. If there's great science out there, help pool and those resources to cure this dastardly disease.
Well, the last question we want to talk about was just around prizes. Some have come here with interest around that. I'll just give some context for us at the John Templeton Foundation. This is something that we employ as a common mechanism in the variety of areas that we work in. We give one of the largest cash prizes in the world, larger than Nobel, about $2 million for the Templeton Prize for Spiritual Progress. And then we use it in all our different content areas. And even all the while, we're always a learning institution. So some of you are employing this. Some, like CT's husband, just on Friday announced that they are now looking to develop a prize to inspire innovation in a variety of contexts throughout Africa, and they're still formulating how that will go. So there are some, like Tsitsi, in the room.
Hopefully you can help us.
Yes, we're going to help. And then there's some here who may be considering it or actually utilizing it now. So for those of you, what we want to know is, when you have a competition, say as the one you have, Dick, how do you do it so you maximize the impact for both those who win and even for those who didn't win but went through the pursuit? And then how do you gauge the results? So I know that you have a prize. I think, Jean, you might want to speak to this too. Jean, do you want to start since Dick there's
Sure. Well, one of the things that we did very early, I mentioned this before, experiments with social media. And we got very jazzed by the opportunity to have challenges around people getting engaged in causes they cared about and championing for those causes. And so we collaborated with some other foundations, and we used 2 partners, and they were really at opposite ends of the spectrum. One was Facebook Causes, and this was the absolute earliest days of Facebook, and the other was Parade Magazine. And the reason for that is we knew Parade Magazine readers, for the most part, had not been engaged in online giving. So it was a huge opportunity maybe to win them over and get them starting to make microdonations online. So we did these challenges. We learned a lot of lessons exactly along the lines that you just talked about. How to keep people engaged each step of the way, how to keep them motivated, how to make sure that you had enough tiers in the game, that you got a nice, diverse group of folks participating. And then when the first challenge ended, we published a paper on all of our learnings, and we were really quite excited to see that a number of large entities in the United States took that work, companies like Pepsi, some different banks, Chase with their giving challenge, et cetera. And we went and trained their folks then on how they could do that. And they brought a much broader scale to their prize competitions. And so it was very exciting work for us. And then we came back and we did a second prize where we tried to apply all of the lessons learned. And once again, we published all of our findings. And it was little things like making sure that we had daily awards. Because if somebody got too far behind on the big prize, they were going to drop out. They weren't going to keep working at it. So there were all kinds of little things like that that were tips and tools that we tried to make clear after we kind of ended the prize and went into training mode for others. And all of that, by the way, is on the Case Foundation website, which is casefoundation.org. If you're thinking about or any of your organizations are involved in prizes, a lot of learnings there from that work.
Yeah. And we learned that success led to new opportunities. So we then were asked by Merck to do a prize on diabetes and the best way to transform treatment of diabetes. And then NCI, and I think maybe because of you, Jean, we have projects with NCI at FDA, and the NCI is with breast cancer. And something that we're just doing now, there are a lot of NIH patents that are just lying on the shelf. And we are asked to take 100 of the patents and develop and incentivize competition to develop these into commercially viable companies. And generally or normally, you can license a patent from the government for $1.5 million. But we've arranged to have these companies license them for $2,000, payable only if it becomes commercially viable. So talk about leverage.
Super cool.
I mean, if we have 100 companies, and let's just say one of these companies develops a cure for Alzheimer's, think of the impact. And so we're very excited about that new opportunity. And when you talked about lessons, we had progress prizes because we didn't want the person in first place, and remember there were 39,000, and for a while that group was an American group, consistently was in first place, and then was surpassed by a group from the Netherlands, and then was surpassed by a group from Australia. But we didn't want other teams to drop out. So we gave, I believe they were first $20,000, $50,000, and $100,000 progress prizes, and then 50, 75, and 150, something like that. And what eventually happened, which now these teams had never met, but they kept on competing against each other. So they joined together because they were looking at the problem differently. And collaboration, together, they were much more effective. So the latest group in first place was the Netherlands, joining with Australia, joining with America. And so I'm sort of proud of that, and that's a lesson learned.
And one thing I'll say just as a resource for you in case it's helpful, I put in the back on a small table at the exit door a McKinsey report that we underwrote about a mapping of what is happening in the prize world, so you can see different examples and different lessons there. And if we run out of copies, I put a sheet with a link, a web link to it, so that, or if you don't feel like carrying it back because you have enough to carry home. So you have that there as well. Let's open it up to questions. We don't always get the opportunity here, and we thought you might want to engage, whether you want to ask them specifically about what they're doing on a certain particular topic, or about how they're doing it. So if you felt any resonance and wanted to dig deeper, let's go here first, sir. And then if we can turn up the lights so that I don't miss out on somebody who's raising their hand in the back and I can't see them. But we'll still start here, but if it's okay to put on the lights unless I'm violating some rule, that would be great.
Thank you very much for this, putting together this panel, and for sharing your insights and experience. It's extremely enlightening. The question is about the blurring line between not-for-profit and profit, and specifically the issue, putting aside jurisdictional regulatory issues for a moment, whether it's addressing social justice issues or education issues, at the congruence of technology and solving problems, and Dick, your program with the NIH is fascinating. At what point can a philanthropic effort become a for-profit effort, and when does, and is there a driver or a question about solving problems, seeking profits to either cure the problem entirely, as some patient advocacy groups are trying to do in Faster Cure and other health-related areas, or in the social justice area, solving problems or alleviating them to a point where the efforts can be geared towards addressing and solving perhaps other problems. So the question really is, do we still have a dividing line between for-profit and not-for-profit? Or do we move into an era, a gray era of not-for-profit becoming for-profits and vice versa?
I sense Jean and Andrew want to speak to this.
Jean, you go first.
Why don't you start?
Well, no, just to say, the best philanthropy you can do is where you invest in a developing country, create a sustainable business, employ people, get them accumulating capital so they can go out and compete with you. Just that great generator of wealth. So I'm a big fan of investing. I'm a big fan of for-profit investing. You have impact investing and all the other trendy terms, but I can assure you, people like Carlos Slim and others, they don't have a lot of time for philanthropy, but they make some pretty brave investments in the developing world, which kicks off all sorts of other investments. So I'd say business can do a great deal of good, particularly in the developing world, if they apply the principles and values which they're being held to account for by Western shareholders in the developing world, it actually starts as a beacon of light, beacon of hope, and gives a good base for philanthropies to go and do some of the heavy lifting, which obviously business won't go and do. So I see a real role in both.
Yeah, and this area of impact investing, you're right, it is a trendy term, but the idea there really is how can we unleash business more fully as a force for good, and specifically tap the entrepreneurial spirit and private enterprise to drive change. And you know, I think as we look at how we've solved problems and addressed problems in our communities, we largely think about the public sector, we largely think about philanthropy, and too often we've left entrepreneurs or business on the sidelines. And yet most of the innovation in the world comes out of that sector. So at the Case Foundation, we've been very excited about the momentum we're seeing in impact investing. And some of you I know have been with us at some impact investing panels we've had here at Milken. We do believe there's a lot of traction in that space, specifically investing in companies that have a purpose and a mission and commit to metrics around their impact as they look at changing the world. We think it's a really exciting area. We think it might be able to break through with transformative change in some really dogging areas where we haven't been able to find solutions.
And one other brief example that's different is that there's an organization that was started a year and a half ago, announced at Davos, called 1001 Voices, started by John Coors, and then he mobilized another 15 highly influential philanthropic families. And they decided to capitalize as a for-profit rather than nonprofit to advance free enterprise in sub-Saharan Africa. So they just made the choice that they said, how can we be impactful? This is nothing that's a predatory element that they're looking to make money, but they just figured that you have to travail a certain system if you go into philanthropy, and doing it in a for-profit element freed them up in some ways to still get the intention that they wanted, which was to build more self-sustaining economies in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, look, just to be blunt about it, philanthropy, if it's pure charity, is simply not sustainable. If you want to create sustainable change, it's got to be for-profit. I don't intend to be in business, so I don't intend to be working on slavery all my life. I want to get the job done and move on. You know, that's a business-like approach. The reason for that is that we'll never produce a profit from it, so it has to end. Slaves become very profitable in their own right for themselves, for their communities. Once you stop using a person's body and use their brain, you only have to look at all of China to see what political servitude looks like back in the Cultural Revolution, to see what that nation's done once they were freed to use their minds. Apply that anywhere else in the world of slavery, you get the same thing happening. So, you know, business has a huge role to play because it's the most sustainable enterprise, and every slave we free gets what they want to do, go on a micro business. That's sustainable.
In that same vein, we'll be announcing, it won't be us directly, but sometimes we fund other prizes, and Elon Musk, myself, and anybody in the audience would like to participate. We're doing a global literacy prize, and the goal is to increase literacy to a 4th grade level in 1 billion people. And we were trying to do it both in Africa and...
Yeah, that is deserving of applause.
We were trying to do it in Africa and Asia, and we were delayed, and now we decided just to do it in one country because of funding requirements. And so my point is that all of these 1 billion people will be eventually in the workforce. So they will be transformed into a for-profit center.
We had a question from the 3rd row.
My philanthropy is a trade initiative called Same Sky, where we employ HIV-positive women who survived the Rwandan genocide, who needed a hand up, not a hand out. And all the beautiful jewelry that I'm wearing and Tsitsi's wearing is Same Sky. And the reason I'm asking, and the question that I have, and thank you, Andrew, because it's giving your time and getting on the ground with people that makes a difference. How can we create a more soulful economy? How can we take responsibility for the kind of shopping we do? Do you know who made the things that you wear? Do you care? Think about the Bangladesh fires. Think about the fact in America that more than 1 out of 10 families has a storage unit because we have so much crap we don't even know where it came from. The point is, how do we create a more soulful economy? How do we build an ethical shopping movement where we change lives, and by changing lives, we wear things that make us feel more authentic, more like people, more connected to the world? I ask you how we do this.
So I think your story is an interesting one. I was just in Rwanda and visiting several sites where they were training women out of HIV and out of the genocide who were affected by it. And one of the stories I heard I thought was really cool, and that was what really turned it and made it very sustainable was Chico's had picked up several of the products here in the United States, and then Macy's did a contract with them as well, which allowed them then to go to scale and really have a sustainable plan. I think this point of collaboration is really important, and your question is a fair one, is, you know, part of it is transparency, right? Part of it is making sure that as we buy products and services, we know the history of those products and services. But I know I'm much more aware today, say, than I was 5 or 10 years ago as a consumer about where those products are coming from and who benefits from the money I spend.
Yeah, can I just stop here? There's no heroes up on this stage, right? We're just...
Except for you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But what we have done is we've like I think Jean said earlier, if someone asks you to help, I find if I go around businesses, you know, some of the business titans who you'd think would have all the soul of a block of ice, and you say to them, this is how your business can really make a difference. This is the advertising you can do on your products to say this coffee came from here or these dresses came from there, that there was absolute free will in the factories where this was produced. And really, you get hard-edged about it. Whether or not someone's paid 10 cents an hour or 12 cents an hour, it's not the important part. You know, if they're more competitive because they've got low cost of labour, then everyone's going to go there. It's when they're not free to go to a better boss at 8 cents an hour or worse boss at 15 cents an hour, that's really the issue. And if you engage businesses like Jean's, like all of them up here, like in Zimbabwe, if you engage business, if you ask, I bet you if Titsi said, you know, I got involved because of, it will be because someone asked her for that hand up. And I'd say just get out there, talk to businesses, say to businesses, you can make a greater profit for a more sustainable future for your greater market, which is your kids, by doing X, Y, and Z. Just ask.
Can I just, maybe, I hope I've understood you clearly. There is such it's so important to really appreciate the importance of philanthropy and business, and that the two can strongly coexist. I know Africa needs a lot of investment, but philanthropy is the one that focuses, those are the dollars that are available that are not looking at return on investment, doing work that may never be recognized as important. Yeah, the heavy lifting work. But I think you really seriously need both. Yeah. I'll give you an example. I had a problem of paying school fees for children, walk 5 kilometers, get home, it's too dark to study, they're tired, right? I come across a lantern. So I take it to my husband and I said, you know what, imagine if we could get this lantern available to thousands of children. It means they have more time to play, to socialize, to have a normal life, so they can be healthy employees for your business. And he says, nah, what does cell phones got to do with lanterns? No thanks. So I took money, sent somebody to China. I said, go find out how they make this thing, and you know how we can bring some samples and see if we, how we can get him to be impressed. So every evening I would switch off the light and switch on the lantern. And he said, please, can you switch off that lantern of yours and, let's have some light. Eventually, he saw an opportunity. He said, hey, we can use the lantern, the solar lantern, to charge cell phones. And I can generate money. But you know what? If I hadn't been persistent, if I hadn't been driven by the need for these children to have a life, to have to improve the life and have light and what have you, I don't think he would have gone for that opportunity.
So it's a great example.
Very critical.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to the last question here, and I apologize that I can't see people in the back. I feel like I'm at a high school play, and I can't see my family if they're not in the first row, but this is what I can see.
Can we get some of Titsy's lanterns down the back?
Yes, so let's go here.
They're really lovely. Oh, you should see them.
Does anybody have a mic for this gentleman?
Over here. Sorry. You started out this chat with saying, do you want to go it alone or collaborate? And for my business, we started a foundation in 2008. And it feels like there's so much redundancy in what we're trying to do with so many foundations across the country and globally. And I'm just wondering if you guys can shed some light on successful collaborations, foundation to foundation, that you've seen.
Yes.
Sure. I mean, slavery is a measurable man-made thing. We can end it with man. It's not some amorphous mass. So it'll only be collaboration with all the other NGOs and governments and the faiths which will ever end it. Walk Free has got no chance of ending slavery. Walk Free has a serious chance of creating the collaboration amongst the NGOs and the governments and the faiths, etc., to altogether end slavery.
I think Faster Cures would be an example of someone that brought different foundations together. Faster Cures originally was designed to bring the NCI, the FDA, and NIH together because it became apparent that there were medical devices and medical procedures that were occurring in other countries that did not exist here. And it was asked why, and it was because not invented here. So for example, just the definition of death, in Japan it was heart death. So if death is defined by heart death, there would be no heart transplants. So actually, I think it was in 2003, a surgeon did a heart transplant, was indicted for murder in Japan because it's heart death, not brain death. So that was the original concept of Faster Cures. And at one time, they brought breast cancer foundations together and Alzheimer's foundations together, and nobody was collaborating, and they were all fearful, well, you're going to take my my contacts and my investors, and even things like any kind of disease state. When they were doing research like cystic fibrosis, someone was going one direction, someone was going the other, and when they got together in a room and they said, oh, you know, we did this 5 years ago, and that's a dead end. So they got together and they started sharing information, and the breast cancer organization shared information, Alzheimer's shared information, the Heart Association shared information, and it was remarkable how like on, you know, I hate to use the word steroids, but on how on steroids things progressed. So that's my example of what an organization has done collaborating.
We have time for one brief question and one brief answer. We'll go to this gentleman, and then I'll seek to close it out, please.
Thank you. Amazing panel, and you're all courageous for being on the panel. I'd like to ask a confrontational question, however. The ugly side of philanthropy, families like the Walton family, who own Walmart, who give huge amounts of money to philanthropy, but are also directly linked with slavery and the Bangladesh fires and so on. And Andrew is an extraordinary Australian, equally a mining billionaire. A mining billionaire that is directly linked to employing more Indigenous Australians than anyone else, but at the same time there's controversy around some of that. So how does philanthropy measure up with the integrity of how the money is earned before it's then distributed?
Can anybody give a brief answer to that very simple question?
Who, me? Yeah, absolutely. Look, we go and see the Waltons or their representatives, and I can assure you that they're not knowingly involved in slavery. I did an audit after my daughter dragged me into slavery through her own experience. I did an audit of my own supply chains. I've got about 3,000 suppliers. We found slavery in our supply chains. It was just shocking, but we only found it because we looked for it. It's everywhere. And so, look, I'd say I don't really see that many examples, if any, of philanthropy being used just to cloud a bad business practice. But I see a great deal of senior executives who just haven't asked the question. And if they ask the question like this lady was speaking about, you know, then they'll react. But we've got to help chief executives around the world with their own conscience. They've got it. We've just got to guide it.
Well, thank you. Well, just to close it out, one, I want to thank the panel, not only for coming here and sharing your stories, but also, while you say, Andrew, that you're not heroes, you know, my wife and I are nowhere near the collective billions that are reflected on this panel, and I'm so thankful that there's a world where each of the 5 of you are in it, because you're not required, or you may not feel required to do what you do, but you're doing it with such depth and such commitment, and you are changing lives, you are saving lives. So I am personally thankful for what you're doing. And to those of you who are here who are already entered into this or thinking about it, I'll give you one thing that I haven't shared, so I'll try it out with you, which is I was at Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned at one point, and for a good while. He was there. I wasn't there for a good while. And what I learned when I was there was that they had erected a lighthouse. And if you think about a lighthouse, if you've ever seen one, it's always on the edge of the shore. This one they put right in the middle of the island. And as a result, when they put it right in the middle of the island, because all the people on the boats assumed, like every other lighthouse, that it was on the edge, they thought that they weren't as close, that they weren't as close to land as they were. So when they put the lighthouse on, all these boats started hitting the land because they thought that the lighthouse was right at the shore, but instead they kept coming against it. And so I give that example to say you can have the best of intentions, you can have the right resource, and unless you use the right application, it doesn't get the impact that you're trying to achieve, and in fact could sometimes even do harm, as that did. And so that's why we wanted to talk with you about the how, because it's really important to really think about the tactics and the way that you're doing this, and not just think about the heart and the trying to change you're trying to do. So that's what we're trying to challenge you with, and we hope we did today. So thank you for showing an interest in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.